Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast, It's a Numbers Game. I'm your host, Adam Morris, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Welling. And today we are talking about a new term that, to be honest, I'd never heard of a few months ago, Co-opetition. It's a great way to describe collaboration and partnerships between competitors in the same industry. And our guest today is Shawn, Walsh, a seasoned MSP veteran and peer group facilitator. In this episode, our three key takeaways are how embracing coopetition can transform competitors into valuable allies, why undervaluing your services could be holding you back, and how to build a supportive MSP community to grow your business and overcome challenges. I hope you enjoy this conversation that's packed with actionable advice. So ladies and gents, please welcome Shawn Walsh.
Shawn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And our audience will probably guess by the accent that you're not from the UK. And we actually met you last year at a Coopetition event, I think, in London. And
Yes.
so you're based in the States, but also there's a holiday island as well, isn't there? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I am lucky enough to spend half my time in New Hampshire on Lake Winnipesaukee. We are about 2 hours north of Boston, where we're headquartered. And then I get to spend half the year in Aruba, far from the beach. And we run events down there for MSPs. And we have an outdoor classroom that we built on the property. And it's not a bad setup.
And of course, Adam and I are looking forward to at some point coming over. And I think you mentioned about giving us scuba diving lessons. And
Yes. So my other claim to fame is my side hustle that I work as a dive instructor when I'm in the islands. I've actually been a professional diver in one way or another since 1986. And when I started living in the islands part-time, the guy at the dive shop saw me and said, "Hey, you actually know what you're doing." I'm like, "Yeah, not my first rodeo." So they asked me to come on as an instructor. And so when they need an extra set of hands, they call me up and I go out and I teach some scuba lessons. And it allows me to take people out and introduce them to the hobby.
brilliant. Well, we're looking forward to it and packing our snorkel in anticipation. So
Absolutely.
we've got an interesting topic for today. As we often do, we chat at events and then following and then ahead of today's podcast. And we really wanted to get into topic of co-opetition. And I guess you've a background of being involved in peer groups for some time, I believe, with ConnectWise. So maybe talk to us a little bit about how you found that topic over time.
Yeah, so I had an MSP for almost 25 years. We grew it from the basement of my house with me and my wife to locations in 4 states across the US. And we sold it at the end of 2017 to private equity, and I wasn't ready to be done yet. And in addition to my MSP background, I've had a teaching background, so I've taught college and high school. And while I built my MSP, I was a member of peer groups. I received coaching, but the peer groups were incredibly valuable and having a community of other business owners and MSPs to work with. So during that time, I was not only the member of peer groups, but I helped ConnectWise start their regional peer groups. So myself, MJ Shore, who's head of channel for GTIA, formerly CompTIA.
Yeah.
Myself, him, and a few others started the first ConnectWise regional peer group. So we were kind of the beta testers. And we were the facilitators for many years of that Northeast group, as well as being in our regular paid group. So when I sold my company, I knew I wanted to stay in the channel, but I wanted to do something in the teaching. While I ran my business, I managed to get my MBA along the way. So I felt like I had some knowledge beyond just the fact that I've been here and done. We started up Encore Strategic, and our main things that we do for MSPs is we provide coaching, but we run peer groups, and that is probably our largest offering. And we bring people in, and the idea is to put together a group of MSPs that act as a board of advisors for one another. And they're people who are there that when you have a problem at your company, you can throw it out to the group and say, "Hey, everybody, this is really kicking my butt this week. what have you run into this before? How can you help? And you'd be amazed at the responses that people get. And I often say that when I was a member of a peer group, my peer group helped me up off the floor when I was getting my tail kicked. And they knocked me down a few pegs when my ego would get too big. So they kept me in check. And that's what a board of advisors should do. I've done it through the volunteer side. I've done it through the paid side. But no matter how you engage, this business is amazing for the community that it has. Worked in other industries, and there is no other industry I've seen that has the level of community that the MSP community has. And people need to be taking advantage of that.
And the first barrier to, I guess, engaging in that is the fear of engaging with your competition. And how did that manifest itself in the early days? Obviously, we've got lots of points of reference now, thanks to peer groups that haven't been around for some time. But how did you get over that in the beginning?
Yeah, sometimes people were very standoffish and said, hey, these people are my competitors that are in the room. I don't want to share my best practices. I don't want to share my secrets. And the reality is, what we realized was that these people aren't my competitors. And these people are people who understand my industry. They might have some additional expertise that I don't have, and we can support each other. And, we call it co-opetition. So the idea is technically, yeah, on paper we're competitors, but the reality is that the market is more than big enough for all of us. Years ago, I was at a conference and somebody was complaining that the company who was holding the conference was allowing too many people to sell their software in a certain area. And one consultant who I'm still friends with to this day, she stood up and she said, you know what? I don't care how many consultants you put in my area, as long as they're good, because good consultants are good for all of us and bad consultants are bad for all of us. And that really stuck in my head and it's never left. And so when I look around the room and I see people doing what I'm doing, my first response is, how can we support each other to help each other to grow, as opposed to, oh my gosh, that's my competitor. I don't want to tell them anything. Somebody who was technically my competitor helped me through my very first network install, and it never would have been successful without it. What MSPs need to realize is that we're not usually each other's competitors. The competitors that we need to worry about are the companies like Microsoft and Dell and the people who want to eliminate that last mile that we represent from the product to the client. Dell was built to go direct. They have fought MSPs for years, and they've killed MSP programs. They've reinstated them. They've gone back and forth. They've never been able to close that gap. And that's what we need to worry about. Interestingly enough, where my first office was, when you pulled into the parking lot, first door on the right was an MSP, and then I was two doors around the corner, an MSP. He was Parrot Computers. I was Paradigm Computers. And we always got each other's deliveries. And he and I ended up owning our units. And we both wound up on the board of directors for the condo complex where our office was. And we often joked with people because they'd say, oh my God, you guys are right next to each other. You're competitors and you're so friendly with one another. And we'd just laugh. And we'd say, we've known each other for over 10 years. And in that time, he's taken one of my clients. I've taken one of his, and we both tried to give them back.
Yeah,
True story.
just a couple of thoughts my end on this, because I was, one of those typical owners, insular, fearful, worried about competitors in my town stealing all those beautiful clients, from me, or taking them, so that I couldn't get them, hiring people that I wanted to hire, all that kind of fear mentality. And I think it's not particularly helpful, as we've just talked about. And a couple of thoughts. Number one, in any one town, there's about 50 MSPs, right? Varying size. Obviously, it depends on the size of the town, but it's going to be a minimum 10, probably 50, right? So any individual MSP that you build a relationship with isn't your competitor. It's just 1 in 50. So, go out there, build some strong relationships with some. You're not going to be mates with them all, right? Just have some
Absolutely.
And you know what? When you need a bit of help from them or vice versa, there's some support for you there, and that can come really in handy. The second point I was just going to make was around this. There seems to be an overall, I'm not sure if it's the same in the US, but certainly in the UK, there seems to be an overall sentiment of devaluing what MSPs do, or this theory of, no one will ever pay, £100 an hour, whatever it is. That's why I'm selling my services at £40 an hour. Well, you're not going to make money at £40 an hour. Yes, but my competitor down the road sells it for 38, so I can't, or whatever the perceived price is, or whatever it is. So you end up with this kind of a race to the bottom kind of mentality, where pricing seems to be based on what the guy around the corner is doing, and the guy around the corner is basing his price on someone else down the street, and it's just artificial, and it's artificially low in my view, or in our view. And I think we could all do with building and just generally truly understanding the value of what we do overall. Solicitors, architects, doctors, other accountants, other professionals don't do this. It seems to be a problem in the MSP world. Certainly you.
Absolutely. I see it every time we take on a new consulting client. One of the first things we do is a financial analysis. We look at their books, we look at their profitability. One of the key things for an MSP is gross profitability. After your tools that you deploy to a client for your stack and your labor costs, your engineers, if you deduct those costs, what's the gross profit of your agreements? Agreement gross profitability is a key measure. And we often see that companies come to us because their gross profitability is too low for them to be profitable. And they are the biggest hurdle to get past, because it's the mindset of, I can't charge more. And your prices should never be based on what you think you're going to get because of what the person around the corner is charging. All right. Your pricing should always be based on your cost. There's a financial model that we use with MSPs, and the perfect financial model is that here's what your gross profit is, here's what your administrative expenses are. And in the end, we model it so that you come up with 20% or better NOI, net operating income, net profit, quality, but usually not a big difference between those two numbers for an MSP. But there are so many places that are operating at less than 20%, which is completely doable. And the owners are typically the biggest impediment. And there's an old saying in the US from Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't.
Indeed.
You're right. And it's the mindset of, I can't raise my rates. And years ago, I remember sitting in a peer group, my facilitator, and he was telling me, you have to raise your rates. And I'm sitting there and again telling him in front of the group, I can't raise my rates. My clients will never pay that. And finally, he put his fist down on the table and he said, stop imparting your cheapness on your clients. You're the cheapest person I know. Your clients aren't. Go home and raise your rates 10%.
Yeah.
And I did. And guess what happened?
Well, your profit went up probably 40%.
But from the client standpoint,
Nothing
happened. Nobody even noticed. Nobody even questioned it. I was like, oh my God, all this time I've been here undervaluing. And then a year later, we raised the price again and again. Nobody noticed. I have worked with 2 companies recently where the first thing we did, we came in, we analyzed the profitability. And one was an MSP, and we found 10 clients that their profitability was negative. So they were actually paying the client to do the work for them in the end. And we went through the list, and there were 2 companies that were just bad clients. They did not align with the MSP's core values. They were constantly, asking for discounts. They were paying late. They were just a C-list customer. And we said, you know what? Fire these 2. The other 8, do you like working with them? Yep. Here's what they need to pay for the services that you're doing so that this is a profitable agreement. And for a couple of the clients, we had to quadruple the monthly spend. I don't think there was anybody that was less than double. And it went up from there. And he went around to those clients. Now, against my advice, he went to the 2 that I told him to fire. And in the end, the 8 good clients all said yes. the most common response was, we were wondering how long it was going to take you to raise your prices. And the two that I told him to fire threw a fit, and he wound up firing them on the spot because he got so mad at their response, blaming him for issues. So in the end, he added about $10,000 a month to his MRR just because he went out and asked. And that's all it took. The other client, she, after we analyzed her client base, half her clients were unprofitable. We looked at them on a case client by client basis. I told her, I said, you could fire half your clients, have half the work, half the headaches, and make more money. And it was eye-opening. And again, she went around to all the clients. And once again, the common response was, what took you so long? So people need to know that there's value in what they're doing. And quite honestly, if somebody's charging $40 a seat or 40 pounds per seat, there's no way they're doing this.
And they're
There's a
charging an
minimum
awful lot less
standard
than
you
that
have
as
to
well, and they're
What's
charging
that?
an awful lot less than that as well, which is really worrying.
Yeah.
And they're wondering why they can't actually build their business, and why,
And their clients are wondering why they're still having
and they're just
downtime,
attracting the wrong
because
clients.
you
That's the thing.
can,
They hold on to the wrong clients.
yeah,
They can't truly invest properly to build those, top tier services to look after the good clients. And so eventually they'll lose them as well if they're not careful, because they're not charging enough.
exactly. I work with a lot of Canadian clients, and at one point I had a group that I was doing peer groups for up in Canada, a Canadian franchise, and I often heard from them, we can't charge what you charge in the US. We can't charge that. And it was the per seat price that I kept getting pushback on. And then I got a young guy who started an MSP way up in northern Canada in the boonies. Well, he didn't have competitors to tell him he couldn't charge. And he started charging 200 Canadian per seat, which is more than double what the others were charging. And I said, well, how'd you set your price? He goes, well, I looked at my cost. I figured this was what it should be. I said, well, everybody in Canada tells me you can't charge that per seat. He goes, well, nobody told me that. And he just went out and sold it because he didn't know any better. And you know what? And he was doing great. So it really is about mindset. And it's also how you sell. There's so many MSPs, and this is a really unfortunate problem, but there's a lot of them who really think that what they're doing is only worth that price.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you're doing it, I mean, there's a lot more. You're not just fixing computers. You're keeping data secure. You're keeping a business running. I told one MSP, you have to set a minimum threshold, 1,500 US a month, or you don't take them on. And he said, well, I have a meeting with a small law firm and they only have 3 seats. And even if I charge 200 a seat, that's only $600. I said, well, you explain to them, if they would like your services, this is the minimum. But if they add up to 10 people, so that, it's an average of 150 a seat, that they won't have a price increase. And he went into the attorney and he laid that out in front of the attorney, and the attorney thinks for a second. He goes, yeah, that's 3 billable hours a month. That's fine. And because the attorney was paying for the value. He wasn't.
And it's the perception, everyone has a perception, which is their reality. So that that attorney's perception is it's three hours of my billable time or one of my employees' time, do you know what? For complete data security, maybe I've got 24/7 support in that, proactive this, proactive that, whatever it might be. Yeah, I'll have that.
Exactly. I mean, so to him, the value was, for 1,500 a month for 3 hours of my time a month, I don't have to worry about this, and I know everything's secure and I can sleep at night. So that's the problem, is we're selling like engineers. We're not putting ourselves in the seat of the person in front of us. And I often say to MSPs, you need to stop having server room conversations and start having boardroom conversations. You have to understand their business model. You have to understand yours, but when you're selling, you need to understand theirs and how they're perceiving your value. And that's something that is not done enough.
Great example there of also being deliberate about who you're going to do business with. Can they afford and would they value what you do? Another professional service provider that charges $100 an hour would, their throwaway price would be $300, rather than $1,500. So,
and the other part of that is, if you're an MSP and you're growing your company, you have to understand that some of the clients who got you started are not going to continue with you on the
100%.
journey. And I remember when I lost one of my very first clients, and I was heartbroken. I'm like, but this person could not embrace the idea of managed services and the value. And my wife looked at me. She goes, "Why are you so upset?" Well, he was one of my first clients. She goes, "Yes, and we've outgrown them, and we've grown and they haven't. They're going to do better with the new person who's starting up a solo practice like you did, and we need to move on to other clients." And my wife was a good business partner and often the voice of reason when I was getting fixated on something, and she had that big picture view. But that's the reality, and so many MSPs have such a hard time with that and continue to keep unprofitable clients because they're just emotionally attached to them.
Agreed. And actually, another way of sort of twisting this around then is when a client says, "Do you know what? I'm not sure if we're a fit anymore. I don't get Joe on the help desk anymore." Or, there's some kind of workflow that you've implemented where it's a bit less personal. I feel like maybe you've outgrown us, or something about you doesn't fit with us anymore. Do you know what? Yeah, you're right. And actually, that's a good thing. So, you want to take that away. It's a good thing. You've succeeded in growing. You've exceeded in scaling a business, maturing your processes, and not become all things to all people, right down to a tiny client that you started working with. So there's that relationship piece which often hurts a little bit, right? Because, these guys helped you get started and, went out for dinner with them and whatever it may be. But at some point, do you know what? You will outgrow them, and that's a good thing to have.
Yeah. And a lot of people have a hard time saying no. So one of the strategies that we recommend is, if you're growing as an MSP, find that one person shop. I had a company that was started by one of my college students when I was teaching IT, and he wanted to focus on people with less than 5 computers and home users. And he built an amazing business. He's been in business now 15 years plus and running a very profitable company. But when we had somebody call us that didn't fit that minimum and they just really were too small, we didn't have to say no. What we did was, I often tell people, use yes and. It's a trick from improv comedy. You never say no. You say yes and. We say, yes, we'd love to make sure that you have great IT services, and we have a partner company that I'm going to make an introduction to, and they specialize in dealing with people your size, and we're going to make sure you're well taken care of. So now they don't have a negative opinion of us because we told them, no, you're too small. We said yes, and we have this great partner who's the perfect fit for you. And that helped us we felt that we didn't have to say no to them, so we felt good. And it was a referral from somebody. We don't want to shut down that referral feed, so we made sure the person was taken care of. And at the same time, we're helping this small person who, again, they back us up with taking care of these little guys. So we're not getting bogged down with home users and things like that. But we don't become the company that says no to people.
We'll come back to the podcast in a minute, but first, I just want to introduce you to the mentoring service from MSP Finance Team. How long will you carry on struggling on your own, juggling cash flow, feeling like you're barely making ends meet, when the very reason you started your MSP was not just to help others master technology, but also to secure your own financial future? Or perhaps you've grown your MSP to a good size and are looking to prepare for an optimal sale or acquisition, but have never done it before. We've walked in your shoes. We're ex-MSP owners and have built our businesses from startup to exit and know exactly how it feels to be constantly firefighting or struggling to grow profit. And that's why our mentoring, or call it coaching if you prefer, exists to help you achieve the rewards you set out to achieve in the first place. More profit, more time, and the freedom to focus on what truly matters. So you're probably asking, why should we work with you? Well, we deliver results. Here are just 2 examples. A 10 million MSP with a 7-strong leadership team but lackluster results. Within just 2 quarters of working with us, their profits began to climb. At the end of year 1, their profits will have jumped from 300K to 1.3 million. But we're not that big, I hear you say. Well, we work with smaller MSPs as well. A 400K MSP were suffering a 10% loss before we engaged with them and were struggling to move forward for years. Again, within a 12-month period, we've turned that business around. They've got new clients, they've got their mojo back, and they made a 10% profit this year. If you'd like results like this, book a free consultation now at mspfinanceteam.com, and we'll discuss a burning issue that's been holding you back and give you several key actions to take away and implement completely free of charge with no further obligations. Don't settle for less. Make your MSP everything you dreamed it to be.
And inadvertently there, you've taken us towards one of the other key outcomes I see from the co-opetition community element, finding a way of expanding your delivery capability. You described there in terms of a particular type of client, but maybe there's a geographic delivery element. Maybe it's a particular service capability that a client might have that you may not. And of course, by getting into embracing the community, talking to your competitors, you discover where their strengths and weaknesses are and where you can come together to deliver a more complete solution to a wider audience.
Absolutely. And MJ from GTIA, him and I bordered each other. And there were often times when we might have a client that was closer down his way. In particular, I remember MJ used to have a law firm client, and we happened to really know legal software really well. Most of our clients were attorneys, but we also did the software implementations for them. And MJ could call us up and say, hey, they're using that software that you guys support. Can you come down and help them? Absolutely. And we make him look good, and we get a little, we get a small engagement out of it. But again, it's that supporting one another. It wasn't competition. We've been promoting our peer groups in the UK now, and we've gotten a lot of people that we've talked to that are very interested in joining a peer group. But the fear is, well, this person are you going to be taking anybody from this area? And people were pointing out towns that were a good distance away. And I'm trying to explain to them that you're worrying about the wrong thing. Don't let that prevent you from coming in the group, because the relationship that you build between those other people that are in adjacent communities is going to strengthen your business, not weaken it. And, MJ and I, that was a great example of it. And I feel like we still have some work to do in the UK getting people to buy into the co-opetition. But when I was running the peer groups, the regional peer group for ConnectWise in the Northeast, people would come up to me and say, oh my God, you just spent 2 days standing on stage sharing your best practices and the things that you do to make your company run well. Aren't your competitors in the audience? And I said, well, technically, yes. But then I explained the whole idea of co-opetition. And I can tell you, in over 10 years of running that group and sharing with people who were some of them my direct competitors, right, from the same town, it never, ever created anything bad. Nothing bad ever came from doing that. But I will tell you, I got 3 acquisitions out of that, out of sharing in that peer group, and it helped me build my company. So it was everything that came from that sharing was positive. And that's really the mindset that you need to be going into these type of things.
And Dan, maybe you should mention briefly the initiative that you've come up with, MSP Fund.
Yes, so we obviously been part of the MSP community has inspired the way we work with our competitors, both in the accounting and the wider sort of supporting MSP industry. So we've had a couple of initiatives. A few years ago, we started a group called the In-Betweeners, which brought a number of us solopreneurs together, and that's been a great catalyst for forming relationships. And in some cases, we've managed to collaborate on projects. For example, a subset of us are putting on some events this year, the UK Stadium Tour. So, and that's something that we couldn't have done it on our own, put the concept together and executed it. And then with MSP Finance Team, we've effectively created we haven't actually got a name for it yet. We called it the Global Alliance, although we're not entirely sure whether that sounds a bit Star Warsy or too Star Wars, I should say. And this is where we're working with effectively MSP Finance Team-esque businesses in different parts of the world, the US and Australia, as we see the globalization of the MSP industry really starting to accelerate as
Absolutely.
businesses the MSP support are in improving in their globalization as well. And so yeah, we see the MSPs becoming more global, and therefore the support services the MSPs have as well. But yeah, we compare notes, we review geographical differences, and in doing so, yeah, it makes us all stronger and better equipped to support our customers.
Yeah, and speaking of community, you guys referred over to Tech Tribe, and I got to tell you, that is a fantastic community. I have been thoroughly enjoying that since I signed up and having great conversations with people. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. And yeah, Tech Tribe is one of the, well, I'd say Tech Tribe, CompTIA, GTIA as it is today. Yeah, but both of those groups have been really instrumental in keeping Adam and I involved in the MSP industry beyond our exit. So yeah, I guess we started this conversation around Co-opetition, and effectively we talked more about community and peer group, but I think it's been a great catalyst to explore some of the benefits, and perhaps we'll have to welcome you back the next time you're in the UK for a follow-up episode.
I look forward to it. I'll be back there for the GTIA conference this fall. And we are actually talking about maybe doing some workshops over there for the UK audience while we're in town. So keep your eyes out for that. We'll be putting events up on our website, EncoreStrategic.io, as those events come around.
Brilliant. Well, look forward to that, and to seeing you in the autumn, as we say, and maybe spring in Aruba. Is that what Adam and I should be aiming for with our snorkels?
I think so. Yeah, springtime, when it's saying I'm back in New Hampshire now, and winter decided to wait around for me. So that's usually what I'm trying to skip. But when it's cold and wet and rainy where you are, then that's a great time to be in Aruba.
Brilliant. There we are. Good stuff. Well, we look forward to seeing you somewhere warm, somewhere very soon. And thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Greatly appreciate it.